Since Keir Starmer joined international calls to recognise a Palestinian state, many pro-Israel voices have accused the Prime Minister of rewarding terrorism. Here's Matt Goodwin making a version of that argument on GB News.
What it is going to do effectively is incentivise not just Hamas and not just radical violent Islamist groups across the world who will now conclude that actually violence and terrorism gets you what you want. But here's what I'm really concerned about beyond all of that, which is enough to be concerned about, is it's also going to inspire every other would-be terrorist across Western nations and push them to the conclusion that if they use violence, if they use rape, if they use torture, if they use murder, that they will, in the end, be able to get what they want out of Western states. I think Keir Starmer has been pushed into this because he's more concerned about Muslim votes than he's concerned about British people and also the rights and security of Israel and British Jews. And I think it is cold calculation on his part to reach this decision. I completely, firmly oppose it.
Now, I don't often do this, but I was actually also on that panel and I was having this conversation with Matt, and it's bad form to blow your own trumpet, but I think it's a really, really important conversation. Here's what happened next.
Everything Matthew's just said could have been said about the State of Israel in 1949 when we recognised it. If you look in 1947, there was the Sergeants' Affair, a very famous image, people can Google this at home, of two British sergeants who were hanged by the Irgun, a Zionist militia. One of their bodies was booby-trapped, and when they were cut down, another officer was quite badly injured. About 600 service personnel and police officers were killed in what was then called the Mandate of Palestine by Zionist militias, terrorist atrocities like the bombing of the King David Hotel. And that all happens between 45 and 48. And like I say, we recognised the State of Israel in 1949, legally. So everything Matt just said about how, well, if you recognise this state, it will be succour to terrorists, it will legitimise the kinds of tactics they adopt. The exact same thing could have been said about the State of Israel in the 1940s.
Since
it could. It is literally, and you might say, well, we shouldn't have recognised the State of Israel. It is literally play for play the same.
Helena, apart from telling me that I'm wrong because Britain recognised Israel legally in 1950, de facto recognised it in 1949, I got one word wrong, I'm afraid. But apart from that, what did you make of our conversation?
I mean, I wouldn't even say that it's play-by-play the same, because at no point have the Palestinians in their time as looking for a two-state solution, for example, even in their calls for one-state solution, like none of these particular desires have come at the expense of the Israelis or Jewish people or citizens of Israel being removed from the area at all. Even Osama Hamdan, a member of the Hamas Politburo, said, we welcome anybody to live in the future state of Palestine as long as they agree to follow the rules. It doesn't matter what race or religion they are, as long as they adhere to the laws of the land, right? And that's a member of the Hamas Politburo who said that. Whereas the recognition of the state of Israel in terms of self-determination, which is what this is based upon, Palestinians have a right to self-determination within especially the areas that they currently reside, that they've been pushed into that by the expulsions that took place in 1948, right? The creation of Israel as a reward for terrorism was explicitly worse, because it wasn't just a reward for terrorism, it was a reward for ethnic cleansing. It was a reward for driving the citizens of Lydda and Ramla from their houses at gunpoint and sent on death marches to Ramallah to be able to create a unitary ethno-state. So the recognition of the state of Israel, in my mind, was a reward for not just terrorism, but for ethnic cleansing, specifically so because they wanted to maintain a demographic majority. And the Palestinians of today, they're not seeking to do any of that. The majority of the plurality opinions, or when you poll people in the West Bank and Gaza, is for a separate second Palestinian state. I think they've realized that trying to reclaim all of the territory of Palestine is unlikely as a population, even if the political leaders seem to believe that they want to have a unitary state in future. Again, I'm ambivalent to the solution myself. But in that situation, they just want the 1967 borders in a lot of cases to be what constitutes a Palestinian state for where they currently live, which again, as far as I'm concerned, they have the right to self-determine themselves for that, because that is where they were ethnically cleansed to. Whereas Israel have gone far beyond anything that's been done by any Palestinian militant organization from 1948 until now during the Nakba, which is what we rewarded by recognizing them, by saying, well, there are no Palestinians left apart from the ones that are an Arab minority in what you've declared to be the state of Israel post 1948 war. So yeah, fine, we'll just recognize that. That's cool. Just forget the ethnic cleansing thing. That's fine. I'm like, what? Excuse me? That's a crime against humanity that you're rewarding there. So again, like the recognition of Israel it's even further down the line in my mind.
I mean, here's something I should have said in that short snippet. Would have been a great anecdote for a GB News audience. Zionist terrorists were so off their rocker in the 1940s, they even proposed to assassinate Winston Churchill. Matter of record. Google it. Ergun Churchill assassination. They killed, what was his name? Lord Moyne, a government minister in Cairo. Lord Moyne. Of course, they killed a Swedish diplomat who was working on the behalf of the UN. They killed hundreds, as I said in that clip, hundreds of police officers and service personnel in the Mandate Palestine. Now, if you were Israeli, even if you were a liberal Zionist, you might say, well, those people were treating Jewish settlers and Zionists very badly. So the sergeant's affair where those two sergeants were hanged, that was after there was the execution of 3 members of the Irgun who were planning to carry out a terrorist attack, right? So it was a tit-for-tat thing. The British were doing the exact same thing to the Arabs. You have the Arab uprising in the 1930s. I think it culminates in 36. The exact same thing. So this idea that the British were attacking Zionist settlers, etc., is simply not true. They were trying to maintain something resembling a rule of law in a place where the former state, the Ottoman Empire, had collapsed, and you had these competing claims on sovereignty, the most violent of which, by far, came from a small minority of Jewish settlers, particularly violent Zionists. And their terrorism worked. It worked. It succeeded. Here's another great fact. Alongside the Churchill one, which, my God, right? That is game, set, and match, you'd think. One of the first examples of a Spitfire, as in a Supermarine Spitfire, the iconic plane of the Second World War for the UK, one of the first examples of a Spitfire shooting down a Spitfire was Israeli pilots using Spitfires to shoot down British Spitfires. We ain't taught that, folks. We ain't taught what happened in the 1940s in the Mandate of Palestine. And we ain't taught that for a reason. Partly it's to do with race, and it's to do with anti-Arab and anti-Muslim sentiment, which is pervasive amongst our elite in this country. And partly because, over many decades, our rulers, our elites, view Israel as a useful tool in the extension of foreign policy interests in that part of the world. That is particularly the case in the United States. But we're now coming to a moment, I think, where accuracy, history, the facts are coming to the fore. More than that, you can't ignore this stuff anymore.